if it isn't, then you're really missing out, because imagine spending over half of your waking hours in a place when it's just for the check at the end of the day. You're not even allowing yourself that much time in your life to spend that money because you're tied up at work the whole time. So if we can, instead of clocking into work and simultaneously clocking out of life, basically leaving our identity as we know it and our personal mission as we may see it behind when we clock into work, if we can take that with us.
Hi and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. I'm your host Neha Murthy, and let's begin with a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today David Shar. David is a consultant, keynote speaker, and corporate trainer at IlluminatePMC. His main focus has been to help leaders build work cultures filled with meaningful work and engagement while simultaneously protecting their employees from burnout. As a human capital consultant and a keynote speaker, David Shar offers a refreshing philosophy on leadership, organizational culture, and performance management. A lifelong learner, Shar uses his extensive education in HR management and industrial organizational psychology, along with over 15 years of management experience, to teach and inspire people from all levels within an organization. Shar helps business owners and managers simultaneously create a more positive, passionate, and profitable work environment. Shar offers a refreshing, authentic approach to speaking and consulting, with a life mission of making the working world a more positive and meaningful world for all of us. We are here to be at the receiving end of that approach, and we are so glad to having David over peopleHum today. Welcome, David. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here virtually. I really appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. So, hopping right into the questions, starting with your work, please tell us more about Illuminate Performance Management Consultancy and the work that you've been doing there.
Sure. So, in my work, like you said in the introduction, it's very much about helping organizations thrive. And I believe that organizations thrive when everybody within the organization is thriving. Often we get this mindset where it's management versus employees or some other breakdown. In reality, we have similar needs and wants from our organization. We all want the organization to succeed. So how do we align those needs and interests and our values to get what we want out of the organization? So I help organizations build a culture that's a collaborative culture that gets people closer to that. And even deeper than that, I truly believe that work, when we spend so much time there, it should be meaningful. It should be aligned sort of with our purpose. We should feel significant. We should feel significant within our work, however you want to define that. And so what we do at Illuminate is we help organizations and individuals with that, creating that sort of company culture through consulting, one-to-one sort of coaching, as well as through keynoting and training, where we help larger groups of organizations or within an organization.
Absolutely, that's such a wonderful approach. It's just not about work and just not going there 9 to 5 job and coming back. It's so much more than that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It should be so much more than that. And if it isn't, then you're really missing out, because imagine spending over half of your waking hours in a place when it's just for the check at the end of the day. You're not even allowing yourself that much time in your life to spend that money because you're tied up at work the whole time. So if we can, instead of clocking into work and simultaneously clocking out of life, basically leaving our identity as we know it and our personal mission as we may see it behind when we clock into work, if we can take that with us and use work as a vehicle to live a more purposeful life, to impact our customers, clients, and the world around us in some significant way, I think that that is much more meaningful for us as individuals, and sets up for a much more impactful and thereby profitable organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And shifting gears to the pandemic situation and how we've spent the most of the past year, right? So the year 2020 and with the pandemic, obviously, it has been full of uncertainties, and especially at work. Some are stressful, some are facing pay cuts, some are working throughout the day, and we see that most employees have come to a stage where they end up burning out themselves. So what can they do to perform meaningful work and engagement?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're seeing a ton of burnout right now because burnout traditionally is measured by three things. This feeling of emotional exhaustion, and if you think of these things in the concept using 2020 and everything that came, and who's going to say they haven't felt emotionally exhausted at some point during this past year now, right? So emotional exhaustion is a big piece of it. And then there's this decreased sense of personal accomplishment, which given the current environment, when we had a job and then suddenly it became so complex because now we have to do it from home, or we have to do it while social distancing, or the entire structure of our organization or our job or of our customers changed overnight with the pandemic many times. So we start to feel like we're not really accomplishing as much as we normally do or want to, right? And the third piece would be this increased cynicism. These other two things happen and we start to sort of psychologically protect ourselves, right? So we distance ourselves from the client, the customer, from the work itself, because we're trying to protect ourselves, because we're not feeling accomplished, because we are feeling exhausted. And so the way that comes across, though, often is through this negative sort of experience of cynicism, of really not feeling positive about work. So the way to be engaged in a time like this, oftentimes it's counterproductive, or it seems counterproductive, and it's counterintuitive rather. But oftentimes when we feel like we are handcuffed and we can't get things done, leaders will swoop in and say, all right, here's what's going to happen. And they'll grab the wheel and think that they're saving the organization and saving us. But in reality, giving people a little bit of guidance with some really pointed responsibility, giving them small goals that they can achieve, small but challenging goals that they can achieve, go a long way in actually engaging us, because what it's doing is it's reintroducing that sense of control that we felt that we've lost. It's reintroducing that sense of accomplishment that we feel that we've lost. And so, although counterintuitive, really giving people something to do is, instead of thinking, oh, people are so overwhelmed, I'm going to take everything away, it is really the way to do that. So how do you do that without overloading them? You start taking away the stuff that doesn't matter in the first place. If you open up your employee handbook, or even not the written stuff, just the culture within the organization, within that, there's so much stuff built in that are just sort of habits of the organization, ways we do things, bureaucracy, policies that sometimes shouldn't have existed in the first place, and other times made sense at some time, but don't make sense now. And so we end up just doing these things because it's the way it's always been done. If we strip those things away and give people some things, some tangible projects that are connected to that ultimate why, to the customer, the client, the product, the thing that you're trying to do to impact the world. If you can switch out those silly things, that bureaucracy, for those meaningful things, that's a great first step toward creating a burnout-proof culture and an engaged culture based on meaningful work.
Wow, as you said, like I couldn't agree to it more. As you said, like it's just a simple thing like giving your clients and your employees the why behind the work that they're doing. It makes it so much easier and simplified.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that. It's such a valuable piece of advice.
Thank you.
And you've been practicing organizational psychology as a key important factor, right, to adopt in all levels within the organization. So we'd love to learn more of how it has been helping you in your career as an HR professional personally.
Yeah, so I started out as a practitioner solely, right? I owned a restaurant. I was very much entrepreneurial. I had employees. I was in the thick of it. And I was making things up as they went along. And some things worked really well and some things didn't work really well. And I was inspired by my opportunities in leadership roles. I was inspired by my employees and the way they found engagement in work. But that was all stuff that I sort of stumbled into, like, hey, let's try this. And I blame it on not my naivete, right? Like, so I was so naive that I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to trust this 16-year-old girl from the projects, a really rough neighborhood in Baltimore, Maryland, with a key to a restaurant. She was great. So I gave her a key to the restaurant. I didn't know that that's crazy. So I did it. Luckily, she was just as naive as I was and didn't know that it was crazy. And so she rose to that level of trust. And so there were so many examples of where I just sort of stumbled into intuitively kind of stumbled into things that really helped engage my employees and make a big difference for them and ultimately for me. But it wasn't enough for me because when you stumble into things, there's a very long learning curve, right? And something that works for me might not work for you. Just because it worked in my business, it might not work in another business, even if that business externally looks exactly the same, because internally you have different people and they are your business at its core. They are the DNA of your business, right? And so we have different people and different cultures, and so even the exact same thing that worked here might not work here. So to really dig deeper, I went back to school as an old man and began my study in industrial organizational psychology. And what that does is it takes a scientific approach to work, right? So it really gave me the tools that I now use with my clients to dive into the data and really peel away layers and look at the numbers and look at the trends and look at what's actually happening instead of just walking in and trying to feel my way through it. And then to use empirically backed research studies to help inform decision-making is invaluable. Given, I would say, one caveat. So one of my favorite quotes is by E.B. Box, this famous statistician, who once said that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And it's a brilliant thought. And the reason is because when you are a practitioner, you feel like I've got the answers. I'm in it. I'm part of it. I know what's going on, right? But you have blind spots because oftentimes you're too close and you haven't seen what works across the spectrum and you don't have these models to turn to. But oftentimes when you enter the world of academia and the world of research, it's so easy to cling to these models and say, we have the answer, and puff out your chest and say, anybody can make this happen. But if you ever see a study that has 100%, effectiveness in whatever it is, right? That's a BS study. That study isn't real. Nothing is 100% because different people are different and different scenarios are different. And so neither of those approaches are right. So what I do is I walk a middle line. and I have one hand in practice and in that intuitive side. And when I go in and consult and speak and coach, it's very much, and I tell people this is a partnership, right? Because I'm coming in with the empirical stuff. I'm coming in with the models. I'm coming in with my own diverse experiences, helping a diverse group of organizations, but you're the expert here. And only when you walk that line in the middle do you have something truly special. And so that's how organizational psychology informs my work.
Wow, that's definitely been a roller coaster ride for you completely.
Yeah.
So, moving on to the next question. So, if you had one piece of advice for the graduating class of 2021, what would it be?
I think the advice would be to find your passion, but not to wait for it to find you. In other words, oftentimes people go into work and they're expecting these great things, and this actually leads to burnout. This existentialist model of burnout says that the whole point of burnout, it's sort of like we go in and we have this honeymoon period within our work, and we've got this idea of what work is going to be, and then the reality starts setting in, and we're like, oh, and we burn out, and it's hard to reignite that flame ever within your career. It's almost like you're okay, we popped your bubble now, and now you're in on the secret. Work sucks, right? And I don't believe that work sucks or has to suck. Work is great, and it can be this outlet for you. But you can't go in with unrealistic expectations. You have to walk into it and understand that work will give you what you put into it. You need to find yourself in the work and your mission in the work. So don't spend years looking for the perfect organization to work with. There is no perfect organization. What you need to do is you need to get into the workplace and job craft and create a role for yourself that allows you to use your strengths and your passions and have that impact on the world throughout the organization. So yes, you should find organizations whose values align with yours, and every interview should be a two-way interview. You should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, but don't wait for the perfect thing to come along. You have to seize the day and allow yourself to be open to experiences, because you might find down the line that you find passion in something a little bit different than you thought you were passionate about. That might change over time, but definitely go in with wide eyes, but not with unrealistic expectations.
Wow, that's such a beautiful explanation to that. And it's like, it's a broader approach, right?
Right. Yeah. Because we find that people do one or the other, right? Either they're working for the paycheck or they're working for meaning and purpose. And if you go in just looking for purpose and looking for meaning and this is it, and we find tons of burnout within nonprofit organizations. We find tons of burnout with teachers, educators, right? We find tons of burnout with nurses. These are people who care. They went into this business because they wanted to make a difference, right? Most teachers do not get into teaching because of the great paycheck. They get into teaching because they want to have an impact. And we find larger instances of burnout in education and nursing, a lot of nonprofits and things like that, because people put everything into it and then their bubble is burst. And so we need to protect ourselves of that and be realistic, but be a dreamer as well. Again, everything in life, and I tell my kids this all the time, everything is nuance. If you ever find yourself at an extreme, pull it back a little bit, because the middle road, the nuance, is so often the right path.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, David. And before wrapping up the interview, any quote that describes your feelings towards the future of work and the workplace and you?
Yeah. So what I was telling you before about being in practice, starting in practice. So I had this restaurant. It was an ice cream parlor, and it was located in Baltimore City, where my employees came from some very rough neighborhoods within the city. And I thought I was going to learn so much about ice cream, but I ended up learning so much more about leadership and work, and about diversity and inclusion, and different people having different access to things. And it was such an educational experience for me as I stumbled along this new leadership role. But I specifically remember the time that one of my employees came in, and she was this incredibly happy person, and would always entertain the customers and really engage with them. And one day she came in looking really down. I called her into the back and asked her what was going on. And she had a tear in her eye, and she explained to me that her boyfriend had been shot multiple times and left for dead. He was taken to the nearest hospital by helicopter, which is never a good sign. And she didn't know what would come of this, but things didn't look good. And so immediately I'm like, what are you doing here? Leave. Like, why are you here? And I tried like pushing her out the door, because if your loved one was just shot and might die, you probably don't want to be at work. But she refused to leave. And I understood that so many of my employees had, financial issues, like they were living paycheck to paycheck. And so I told her, I'll pay you for the day and I will personally cover your shift. Just go. And she said, no, I can't go. And I said, what do you mean you can't go? And she said, no, I can't leave. I need to be here. I can only be here. This is my happy place. And that hit me so hard. That was the day, unlike many others, I would put it up there almost with the birth of my first child, in terms of my entire universe just sort of shifted. And this is a long way to answer the question about a quote, right? The quote that I've attached to that really describes that day for me is the quote that's attributed, I think, to Mark Twain. And it is, the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And so we need to keep our eyes open, and we need to seek out these deeper meanings, because it was never about the ice cream. I thought it was about the ice cream. I thought it was about the business. I thought it was about the money coming over the register, right? But in reality, it was about so much more. And on that day, the universe was screaming it to me, that it is about so much more. And that was the day, that was that second day, the day that I found out why. What is it? What is my why? And I followed that path. And that's what led me to going back to school and studying organizational psychology. And it's what led me toward my career in consulting and coaching and speaking, and trying to help others re-engineer their organizations to be that meaningful place, to be that happy place for their employees. Why are so many of us dreading going to work on Monday morning, when we're literally saving lives as doctors and nurses, or we're educating the future as teachers, and we dread our work? But this person was scooping ice cream and found meaning in that, to the extent that this is where she needed to be. It opened my eyes. And so I would tell people to look out for that moment and not to miss it when it's there glaring in your face, that you should capture that. And so that quote, the two most important days of your life, the day you're born and the day you find out why.
Wow, that's such a deep and meaningful quote that you said, and it has huge meaning as you said the story. I'm literally shocked right now to hear, and it's so amazing. And as you regularly mention, the job is not just about the paycheck; it's so much more than that.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much, David. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you. I had so many things to learn throughout the conversation, and I'm sure our audience are going to enjoy that as well.
Thank you, Sneha. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to everybody that tuned into this.
Thank you so much. I hope to stay in touch with you. Stay safe, take care, stay healthy.
Absolutely. You too. Thank you.